It's time to put the good in your morning. You're watching the KOAM Morning News on Fox 14. Today, a Burmese python is found inside the hood of a Mustang.
It is a beautiful start, but also, too, it is chilly. Freeze warnings in effect. We'll find out how much we're going to warm up from the Skywatch Weather Center.
And there's a chance we might see an asteroid pass by before Election Day. The KOAM Morning News on Fox 14 starts right now.
Thanks for joining us on the KOAM Morning News on Fox 14. I'm Tanya Bach. With Election Day tomorrow, both major party presidential candidates will continue to campaign in the swing states. And at a midnight rally in South Florida, President Trump said Joe Biden will ruin the economy, while the former vice president said the country cannot recover from the coronavirus with Mr. Trump in office. Well, President Trump said he wants the vote counting to stop on Election Day, but states will continue to count votes after Election Day. There have been more than 2.4 million mail-in ballots returned in Pennsylvania, and that could lead to a scenario where one candidate is ahead on election night, but ends up losing the state when all the votes are counted a few days later. Well, a wreck south of Franklin, Kansas on Highway 69 results in a car engulfed in flames. This is cell phone video taken at the scene. It happened on Halloween night overnight just outside the Dirty Mule Restaurant Bar and Event Center. According to police, the driver had left the road, smashed into the Dirty Mule marquee sign, and then overturned before catching on fire. Both the Arma and Frontenac fire departments responded to extinguish the flames, and the driver was taken to the hospital with injuries. Kansas Highway Patrol investigates a fatal crash involving a school bus. Leavenworth County Sheriff's Deputy Corporal Daniel Abramovitz died at the scene. He was driving an unmarked sheriff's vehicle when he collided with the school bus. A driver and one student who suffered minor injuries were on the bus at the time of the wreck. Abramovitz worked at the sheriff's office for 26 years. He was set to retire in March. Economic Security Corporation of Southwest Missouri announced it would be closing off public access to its central office in response to COVID-19 concerns as cases continue to spread throughout Jasper County. The changes also apply to weatherization, home repair, and outreach offices. The lobby will remain open, but only for picking up documents. Locked drop boxes are available at all locations, and appointments must be scheduled, and face mask and social distancing will be observed. These changes will go into effect today. The pandemic didn't stop those at James River Church in Joplin from throwing a Halloween event, but festivities were laid out in a new way. The Halloween spectacular drive-through event for kids and families kept people safely apart while having fun. As families drove by, they received free candy sealed in bags that were sanitized and handled with gloves. This safe alternative to trick-or-treating provided families with a look at some of their favorite characters from Frozen, Toy Story, Star Wars, and more.
Team came up with this idea, and we thought what a great opportunity to still welcome the community to James River Church and really have a great time with kids and families that are going to make memories even in the midst of a crazy season like this.
This is the first Halloween event being held at the new location for the James River Church on South Maiden Lane. Well, a ghoulish house in Joplin on 21st and Annie Baxter Avenue caught the eye of plenty of trick-or-treaters. This family went all out with dozens of spooky inflatables this year, transforming their yard into a Halloween hub. A lot of four-state homes went the extra mile this year to offer some safe drive-by fun for kids to enjoy. Love seeing that. All right, what you're about to see next, it's not a serpentine belt, it's a real serpent. Florida Fish and Wildlife officials say they removed a Burmese python from a Mustang in the Miami area. Wow. Ooh, that's scary. They estimate it's about 10 feet long and say it was coiled under the vehicle's hood. It's probably nice and warm. Believe it or not, the snakes are an invasive species. It didn't belong in that hood and didn't belong in that area.
Extremely invasive. I'm going to guess that was Florida. Is that?
It was Florida, near the Miami area. Possibly the owner did get confused and they were told they needed to replace the serpentine belt.
Yeah.
And they had a snake in their house and they're like, okay, I got a serpent. No.
No, Burmese python, you got license to kill in the state of Florida. Anybody does.
Wow.
Is that true with a lot of species?
I don't know about a lot. I know it is with python. It's become so invasive throughout southern Florida. You've got license to kill. You don't need a permit. You don't need to be anybody special.
Luckily, that snake would be too big to get through your vents.
Some counties have programs where you can turn it in, and I don't want to say there's a reward, but there's like a drawing for as many snakes as you turn in.
How does this happen? Is there any, I mean, I'm just trying to walk through the possible
So what I know about the
scenarios.
background of the python, especially throughout the Everglades, is so many people had them as pets, and because of the wildlife in the Everglades, that once they were released, that they've been, populations just gone like that.
Right, but to the point where it's able to get into your...
Oh, I don't know how they get in your car,
hood?
man.
Well, they go up from underneath, obviously, but
That dude lives in South Florida. He knows he's got a license to kill it.
Oh,
He probably took care of it.
yeah.
All right, live look outside of Television City. We're off to a gorgeous start with a bunch of high pressure hanging over the 4 states. That's why we don't have to worry about clouds nor precipitation. Just trying to stay warm because freeze warnings persist through northeast Oklahoma and northwest Arkansas, and do so for the next hour. Expiration time is going to be 8 o'clock for those. 36 right now from the Freeman Health System sky camera with a wind chill of only 30 degrees. 31 is the temperature in Pittsburgh, 32 in Parsons. It's been a little bit better in southwest Missouri, but still chilly. 36 in Carthage and 34 in Lamar. Cold Canadian air following the jet stream right through us, and it's also very dry air mass. Now eventually, once the sunshine begins to kick in, we'll get up into the 40s by the 9 o'clock hour. Southwesterly breeze as well, but when you combine the southwest wind and the dry air mass, a little limited fire risk. Let's avoid any outdoor burning. Temperatures tad bit below normal in the low 60s. That changes dramatically for Election Tuesday as we're up into the 70s, and we get to ride warm temperatures with a whole bunch of sunshine all the way to the weekend. Next shot for thunderstorm activity, not until Sunday. Tanya and Jesse.
All right, well, coming up next, why health officials say getting a flu shot is more important now than ever before.
And an asteroid is supposed to buzz cut Earth coming up today or tomorrow. We'll have the details on that. You're watching the KOAM Morning News on Fox 14.
Harvard University researchers believe grocery store workers were likely a significant source of COVID-19 transmission without even knowing it. Researchers tested 104 grocery workers at a store in Massachusetts in May and found their infection rates were significantly higher than surrounding communities at about 20%. What's more, those who dealt with customers face-to-face were 5 times as likely to test positive than their coworkers. More than a dozen pharmacy retailers will work with the government to distribute the COVID-19 cure. The Center for Disease Control released an interim playbook on Friday for states and local governments on how to distribute the vaccine once it's ready. Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, and Kroger are just some of the retailers working with the CDC. Altogether, the businesses own over 35,000 pharmacies. The first wave of vaccines will go to hospitals and clinics, and then comes the retailers. Well, doctors say getting a flu shot is more important than ever during the coronavirus pandemic, especially for people over 65, because they're at high risk for serious complications from both viruses. Michael George has more on the high-dose flu vaccine that's recommended for older adults.
Mary Anandano always gets a flu shot.
My husband and I were in our 70s. The older you get, the more inclined you are to have underlying health conditions that put you at a greater risk for complications from having the flu.
She's receiving the high-dose flu vaccine, which has 4 times more antigen than the regular shot.
As we age, our bodies have a bit more difficulty making that antibody response to a regular dose vaccine. So if we expose people who are over the age of 65 to a higher dose of that antigen, they're more likely to make a much more robust response.
If you haven't received your flu shot yet, now is the time. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends getting the vaccine by the end of October. Some pharmacies and doctors are reporting limited supplies of the high-dose vaccine, or that it's no longer in stock. But Dr. Kristen England from the Cleveland Clinic says older adults should not delay and take whatever shot is available.
It's really important to get vaccinated against the flu with whatever your pharmacy has. We're starting to get into the flu season right now, so we really don't want people to wait too much longer.
Getting the flu vaccine can reduce a person's risk of illness, hospitalization, and death. Mary knows it's especially important to get her flu shot in the middle of the pandemic.
When so many things are not in our control, it's the easiest thing to do.
She says she's done everything she can to protect herself and her family. Michael George, CBS News.
It can take up to 2 weeks after getting the vaccine for the body to develop the antibodies for protection. Well, an asteroid is set to scream past Earth just before Election Day. But don't worry, the 6.5-foot space rock isn't big enough to do any damage. Renowned astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson said the refrigerator-sized asteroid may, quote, buzz cut Earth on Monday. That's today. But he said it's too small to cause harm. Plus, according to USA Today, NASA previously said there's only a 0.41% chance that it will actually enter our atmosphere.
No worries.
Something to keep our eye on, at least.
Nah, I've been telling you about this for some time. This is what Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck have trained for the past 20 years. We got this.
No Armageddon here.
I had time to look at our almanac for this November 2nd. We're not quite going to get to our high of 66 right there, but I thought this was kind of interesting. You know, we've got presidential election here, election day tomorrow. A record high for this day, at least, you know, before tomorrow was our last presidential election year. Granted, I know it wasn't on the same day or whatnot. I just found that was kind of cool. And look at that record low, down to 16 degrees is what it was in 1991. Freeman Health System sky camera, let's talk about the chill in the air right now. 36 degrees, but a wind chill of only 30. So if we're going to knock off 6 on everything, that means our wind chill is going to be consistently mid to high 20s right there. My microphone got stuck, I could tell. 30 in Miami, where we have the freeze warnings, 33 in Monette, and how about right at the freezing mark in Iola of 32. Now we've got a big high pressure system that's hanging over us, and that's a live look. That's got the satellite coverage on it, that's got the precipitation on it, the entire Midwest extremely dry, but we've got freeze warnings here for about the next 45 minutes for northeast Oklahoma and ranging into northwest Arkansas as well. And these push all the way on the east side of the Mississippi. Bus stop forecast, one thing I do want to point out, not only for the kiddos that keeps it cool, a little southwest wind. Don't get up early this morning and say, hey, let's get some outdoor burning done, you know, nice and cool, let's get a fire start. Nope, because with that increased wind and this very dry air coming down from Canada, we do have a limited fire risk right there. You'll also see how the jet stream mimics our freeze warnings. To begin right here and actually stretch all the way to the mid-Atlantic, where it's just going to be abnormally cold, even for the beginning of November. So we'll get up into the low 60s. Certainly not too bad once that sunshine really does begin to kick in earnest. And overnight, very nice temperatures, nothing like what we're waking up this morning. We'll start election day in the mid-40s for the most part, and as Future Track shows us, don't even have to worry about clouds or precipitation even headed into Tuesday. Tuesday morning, 40s and 50s. Tuesday afternoon, all the way up into the high 60s, and we're going to roll 60s and 50s then overnight. It's going to be a perfect day to get out if you're going to do the traditional voting route. 70 with plenty of sunshine, and look at these warmer temps all the way into the weekend. Thunderstorm activity finally arriving on Sunday. We'll be back with more KOAM Morning News on Fox 14 right after this. With Election Day tomorrow, millions of Americans take to the polls, and it's the people behind the scenes that are going to be doing their part to make sure the voting process goes as smoothly as possible. That's where we bring in our own Jesse Irwin to tell us a little bit about the people working behind those scenes. Jesse?
Yeah, well, most election officials will have more than enough help tomorrow, with a huge turnout expected at polling locations and extra precautions against COVID-19 in place. County clerks across the country knew early on that they were going to need extra help. One organization that focuses on that recruitment, Power the Polls, was aiming to get 250,000 Americans signed up. They ended up getting 700,000. Companies like Old Navy and Target are paying employees who served as poll workers, and areas like Jasper County have felt some of that excitement. Jasper County Clerk Charlie Davis tells us that given the nature of this year, tomorrow is an opportunity for poll workers to do more than implement the democratic process.
But the exciting part is the community aspect of it. For you to be able to work at a poll and potentially see 1,000-2,000 voters come into your polls during the day, and some of them you haven't maybe seen for an extended period of time, especially because of COVID, people haven't seen each other. So this is going to give an opportunity for people to reconnect. Of course, nobody talks politics at the polls, especially the poll workers. So to be able to see Aunt Sue for the first time since March, maybe it's going to be something that's a little exciting for us. But the community aspect is what is great.
While there are citizens who work the polls every election cycle, Davis says there are many newcomers this time around. Coming up in a little bit, we're going to show you why some of them say they decided to work at the polls on Election Day and how they learned their role for tomorrow's election.
You're not going to want to miss this story, folks. I'm going to give a little tease here, Jesse. You talked to a school teacher, and I thought the rationale that he gave for wanting to help out and how he extends that to teaching his students was really something else. It's a really cool story. He did a heck of a job with it, and you folks at home are not going to want to miss that. Now, before we get there, I want to talk Facebook and our morning Instapoll. Pre-election voting has now surpassed 2/3 of all ballots cast during the 2016 presidential election. Get this, more than 91.6 million Americans have already voted so far. That's about 67% of the total ballots cast 4 years ago, and then we've got tomorrow coming. So our question to you is, when do you think we'll know the outcome of the presidential election? Guy Hansen writes, Democrats counting ballots? I'll go out on a limb. Trump has the Electoral College by midnight, barring some precincts refusing to count mail ballots until the following morning. Laura Cliphon Wright says we'll probably know within a couple of days. Too much sin does go wrong. There is bound to be several sites that require more time, but I guess I'll go with the flow, cast my vote, and pray my candidate wins. If he loses, Laura says I'll just have to suck it up. Rocky Cunningham, he says about an hour before the Hurt Feelings riots start and ends with a MAGA. Now, our question on the Instapoll this morning is, when do you think we'll know the outcome of the presidential election? Right now, 61% of the votes come in for a couple days after. Now, on Election Day, specifically, like, let's say tomorrow midnight, let's go early Wednesday morning, okay, for the most part. That's only 18%. And now months after and weeks after have actually fallen behind a little bit compared to where they were. Hey, it's open all morning long. Go to KOAMnewsnow.com/vote. KOAMnewsnow.com/vote. We'll be back right after this.
A federal judge rules the IRS has to send stimulus checks to eligible inmates. This comes months after the government said people who are incarcerated were not eligible and made many return checks they had already received. KOAM's Zach Dodge has why one of our local sheriffs got information from the IRS.
A few days ago, a box from the IRS showed up at the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office in Columbus.
The inmates received an instruction form and then a blank 1040 form.
Forms that inmates could fill out if they wanted to apply for stimulus checks from the federal government. A recent federal court ruling means that the IRS cannot deny paying stimulus checks from the CARES Act passed in March to inmates just because they're incarcerated.
Surprised that there's a potential that they're even eligible, because federal law prohibits any inmates in the county jails anywhere in the country to receive federal benefits.
Under the ruling, the IRS has to send paperwork to prison officials so the inmates can apply. That paperwork has to be mailed back to the IRS by November 4th. And according to Leaf, Cabraser, Hyman, and Bernstein, the law firm that filed the case, that ruling does include inmates at county jails.
There are instances with county jails where an inmate may have been incarcerated maybe years, a couple of years waiting for trial. So there is potential for somebody to be incarcerated today that may have been incarcerated when those initial payments, stimulus checks, went out.
Grove says every inmate at the jail applied and that the paperwork is on its way back to the IRS. But other local jails, like Allen, Bourbon, and Crawford counties, and even Jasper and Newton counties in Missouri, haven't received anything from the IRS.
This is the first information I've received on this.
There hasn't been any official information released by the IRS saying the packets are being sent to county jails. We reached out to the IRS, but the department won't comment on pending litigation. So the Sheriff's Association plans to let all the sheriffs in Kansas know so they can try to meet the quickly approaching deadline.
In all good faith, we should probably be proactive with that and go ahead and do what we can to distribute the forms.
In Cherokee County, Zach Dodge, KOAM News.
Inmates can also file an application online by using the IRS non-filers tool. Deadline for doing that is November 21st. It's time now to honor today's four-state hero. Alan Ensor is a bosun's mate first class in the United States Navy. He served in World War II aboard the USS Nashville, where he earned the American Defense Service Medal, the Combat Action Ribbon, and the World War II Victory Medal. A native of Newton County, Missouri, we salute you, Alan Ensor, our four-state hero. Welcome back to the KOAM Morning News on Fox 14. It's currently 7:30. Let's take a look at today's top stories. With Election Day tomorrow, both major party presidential candidates will continue to campaign in the swing states. At a midnight rally in South Florida, President Trump said Joe Biden will ruin the economy, while the former vice president said the country cannot recover from the coronavirus with Mr. Trump in office. Now, President Trump said he wants the vote counting to stop on Election Day, but states will continue to count votes after Election Day. There have been more than 2.4 million mail-in ballots returned in Pennsylvania, and that could lead to a scenario where one candidate is ahead on election night, but ends up losing the state when all the votes are counted a few days later. A wreck south of Franklin, Kansas on Highway 69 results in a car engulfed in flames. This is cell phone video taken at the scene. It happened on Halloween night, overnight, just outside the Dirty Mule Bar, Restaurant and Event Center. According to police, the driver left the road, smashed into the Dirty Mule's marquee sign, and then overturned before catching on fire. The Arma and Frontenac fire departments responded to extinguish the flames. The driver was taken to the hospital with injuries. The Kansas Highway Patrol investigates a fatal crash involving a school bus. Leavenworth County Sheriff's Deputy Corporal Daniel Abramovitz died at the scene. He was driving an unmarked sheriff's vehicle when he collided with the school bus. A driver and one student who suffered minor injuries were on the bus at the time of the wreck. Abramovitz worked at the sheriff's office for 26 years. He was set to retire in March. The Economic Security Corporation of Southwest Missouri announced it would be closing off public access to its central office in response to COVID-19 concerns as cases continue to spread throughout Jasper County. Changes also apply to weatherization, home repair, and outreach offices. The lobby will remain open, but only for picking up documents. Locked drop boxes are available at all locations. Appointments must be scheduled, and face mask and social distancing will be observed. These changes will go into effect today. The East Troublesome fire has burned nearly 29,000 acres inside Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, with the Park Service there saying there was no timeline for reopening. Staff living on the east side of the park have since been allowed back in, but those living on the west side are still under mandatory evacuation. And while the recent snowfall has helped to slow the flames, many hazards remain. Park staff have been working to clear roadways and assess what areas are safe for visitors to return. And some areas will be inaccessible for quite some time.
But we do have some good news coming out of that, Tanya, and that's our key number right there. 42 degrees right now in Denver. And as Tanya alluded to, the big-time snowstorm that they had last week is currently melting. You've got back-to-back fires up here among this Wyoming-Colorado state line. You've got the East Troublesome fire and also the Cameron fire. Now, there's been no significant growth in those, despite the fact that it's very, very dry. That's the relative humidity you see on the map, and also, too, pretty strong southerly winds. It is the snow melt that has really helped. Now, as far as transitioning to the four states, we've got high pressure hanging over us, which is why the Midwest is just so clear and calm and cold. Freeze warnings for the next 27 minutes through northeast Oklahoma and northwest Arkansas set to expire at 8 o'clock this morning. And a look from the Freeman Health System sky camera shows us only 36 degrees with a wind chill right now of 30. We did have some high 20s on the board earlier. We've been able to move everybody up just around the freezing mark. Fort Scott at 31, Carthage already at 36, but Miami and Grove still below the 32 degree mark at an even 30. By the time we get to the afternoon, though, we'll see low 60s, and as we transition into future track, it's really going to be a dry and eventually warm week. We get past Monday with below average temperatures, and then we're waking up Tuesday with 40s and 50s. Prime time for the Tuesday election day, we'll go almost 70. We'll throw some 70s up there, and even as we approach sunset right there, still sitting at 60. That's a warming trend that's going to carry us all the way through the weekend. High 60s, low 70s. It's going to be dry though. Next shot for thunderstorms not until Sunday. We'll be back with more KOAM Morning News on Fox 14 right after this. KOAM News Now Facebook page and our Insta poll for the morning, asking when do you think the presidential election will be decided. With the number of absentee ballots coming in, tomorrow being Election Day, Brian Bonser said it's called Election Day for a reason. He says Democrats screwing with our election. Tiffany Kessinger says Biden's winning by a landslide, quote unquote, because many Republicans haven't voted yet. Ann Thompson says when all the votes are counted. And Anna Patton Hall, Electoral College vote, probably no night of, popular vote, a couple days after. But she reminds us it's not the popular vote that counts, though. As far as our Insta poll results go, still open. You can go to komnewsnow.com/vote. We've got 62% saying a couple days after tomorrow is when we'll know, followed by tomorrow itself, all right, and I'll give you, midnight after that in a couple hours on Election Day. And now we've got weeks after and months after, kind of trailing a little bit behind. Once again, you go to komnewsnow.com/vote. Now, with a historic turnout expected in this election, the democratic process really is being put to the test around the United States. Tomorrow, of course, being the final day, and we're going to get to a special there with Jesse Irwin in just a little bit. But first, let's over to Mr. Irwin in Studio K.
Pat Timmons Goodson is back on the trail.
Thank you for coming.
I enjoyed it.
How did it feel?
It felt like home.
We caught up with the congressional candidate as she resumed in-person campaigning at this drive-in church service.
Y'all, let's pray with our feet and go out here and vote.
Her latest stop crisscrossing North Carolina's 8th district, one of the most competitive in the country.
What do you see as the key issues in this race right now?
Healthcare, healthcare, healthcare.
She got into the race after serving as the first black woman on the state Supreme Court, hoping to make history again.
You are one of a record number of women of color running. What does that mean to you?
I'm proud. I am excited. I'm hopeful. I'm prayerful. At this time in our nation's history, women of color are offering themselves.
A record 117 women of color are nominees for the House and Senate this cycle, 84 Democrats and 33 Republicans. Approximately half are African American and more than a quarter Hispanic.
I am running for Congress because many people in our representative offices aren't representing us.
Candace Valenzuela would be the first Afro-Latina in the House of Representatives if she flips her Texas seat.
This is a very powerful thing for me, but it's also very disappointing. We've had so many firsts over the last couple of years that should have been first a long time ago.
I will be the first Korean American Republican to serve in the United States Congress.
Young Kim is in a rematch in Southern California, where immigration has been a focal point of her campaign.
I'm an immigrant, and I'm a mother of 4, and I'm a small businesswoman. I want my story to be an inspiration for the next generation.
And for a Congress quickly becoming more diverse.
Looking at the possibility that we're going to increase that diversity makes me even more optimistic and hopeful for this country.
The current Congress is the most racially and ethnically diverse in history, but much of that is in the House. Over in the Senate, only 5 women of color have ever served in that chamber, including Senator Kamala Harris. So if she and the former vice president win next week, it would be historic, but it would also mean a potential loss for her seat on the Hill. Right now, only 2 women of color are nominees for the Senate this cycle. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Around 22 million Americans lost their jobs in March and April when the pandemic hit. Now, about half of those 22 million are back to work, but millions still struggling to find a job. And many people believe being unemployed is hurting their chances. Naomi Rockham has a story.
Scott Cresswell spent 20 years working in the hospitality industry, but was laid off after the coronavirus shut business down. Finding a new job has been difficult.
I think it's hard right now to sell yourself to employers with the amount of options they have.
Millions are having the same problem in a tight job market. A survey from LinkedIn found 84% of Americans believe there is a stigma associated with being unemployed, and 67% think it's impacting their chances of getting hired. But the vast majority of hiring managers say they would hire someone laid off because of the pandemic. LinkedIn editor-in-chief Dan Roth.
So that stigma is something we put on ourselves that doesn't have to be there.
Roth says people having trouble finding a job in their field may be unaware they have skills that can apply to other industries.
One of my favorite examples is of these transferable skills is I talked to an insurance company at one point. They said that when they are trying to hire insurance adjusters, they try to hire bartenders because bartenders have a skill of getting people to tell stories.
Bartender Jenna Hensley was let go from her job when the pandemic hit.
And I decided to go ahead and officially make the career change, and it was due to necessity at the time.
Hensley became a realtor in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and says after a few months working on the new job, she's starting to thrive. Naomi Ruckham, CBS News, New York.
The LinkedIn survey also found 46% of unemployed Americans lied about being out of work. Farmers and grocers are left unsure about what Americans plan to buy this Thanksgiving as the coronavirus leaves millions of people opting for smaller celebrations. Kroger says more than 40% of shoppers plan to celebrate Thanksgiving with just those in their household. So the chain's predicting an increase in demand for alternatives, whether it be pork roast or ham, maybe even seafood, and also plant-based products. Butterball sells nearly a third of the nation's Thanksgiving turkeys, and the company says it does not believe people want smaller turkeys this year. Parents turned to board games to help their kids during the pandemic as toy company Hasbro reported about a 20% jump in sales in its latest earnings release. Company owns classic board games. You got Monopoly, Life, Sorry, also Clue. The spike in sales likely fueled by families stuck indoors because of the coronavirus. Now, as parents try to find new ways to keep their kids entertained while staying safe indoors. The Dunkin' brands, of course, mostly known as Dunkin' or Dunkin' Donuts, and that includes Baskin-Robbins ice cream, is about to acquire Inspire Brands. Now, this umbrella company operates several different food franchise restaurants. You've got Arby's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Jimmy John's Sub, Sonic Drive-Ins, and more. Acquisition price, get this, $11.3 billion with a B dollars. Coronavirus pandemic dropped Dunkin's in-store sales by about 18% during its second quarter, but drive-through lanes aided in the recovery. Dunkin' also adding about 15 million loyalty members to the Inspire brands. Now, you're not going to want to miss this next story. Jesse's got a behind-the-scenes look at some poll workers, including one that's able to translate his job into his other job, which is teaching kids. We'll be back right after this.
With a historic turnout expected in this election, the democratic process is being put to the test around the United States. With tomorrow being the final day Americans can exercise their right to vote, many will also be working to ensure they're able to. In places like Jasper County, it's a great reminder that democracy takes a village. Call it democracy in training. Around the country, county clerks like Charlie Davis hold training sessions for volunteers ahead of each election to go over the regulations and responsibilities of being a poll worker.
I don't think a lot of people understand exactly what poll workers do, because a lot of times when you come up to vote, you walk in, you see them for 5 minutes, and you walk out. You don't realize they've been there since 5 a.m., that they're going to be there till almost 8 p.m., that they're constantly doing something all day, and not just with the voting process, but trying to take care of you and keeping things safe. So I think it's good for people to realize that it is a 5 a.m. to almost 8 p.m. job, and that we need to appreciate the poll workers.
Which is why for the last 3 years on Election Day, Daniel Osborne signed up to be a poll worker.
I think being a teacher, I want to show my students how important it is to vote, and that even though I'm in the classroom all day, that it's also good to go outside of that comfort zone and do something that's going to help the community.
With a historically higher turnout for presidential elections, plus the obstacle of the pandemic, he knew he'd need more hands on deck. and Americans have stepped up.
I did a PSA a couple months ago, and we had a very large turnout. As a matter of fact, there was a time that we were worried that we were going to have enough poll workers for this election. Well, not only do we have enough poll workers, we have about 100 that we can call from. 50 we're using, and that gives us about another 50 that we're going to be able to call up if we need to.
That push for more Americans to work the polls caught the attention of Jasper County residents like Tracy Cope.
I listen to a lot of podcasts all day long while I work, and one of the biggest suggestions that they had was to sign up to be a poll worker to make sure our election goes smoothly this year. It's very important.
Which is why she's helping on Tuesday as well.
It's going to be a long, hard day, but it's worth it.
The community has absolutely stepped up to the plate. Regardless of party affiliation, everybody all across the broad spectrum has decided that they want to participate in helping the election in any way they can.
In America, Jesse Irwin, KOAM. Well, if you have any questions about the election, no need to sit there and wonder about the answer. We have them for you, and a lot more information on our website at KOAMnewsnow.com. And don't forget to thank your poll workers. Michael, it's that easy. And you know, growing up, my dad and I, whenever we'd go to the polls, he always brought them bagels and cream cheese. Every morning. When he'd go to vote, he'd go vote in the morning, bring a bag of bagels. They're there. It is a long day.
They're not there to talk politics. They're there to help.
Actually, the Jasper County Clerk, Charlie Davis, said, you know, the best part about working the polls is that it is illegal to talk politics. Right. So why not want to be there?
Yeah. Right? And like Jesse said, just give them a big thank you. They're a huge part of our democratic process. And I love what that teacher's doing as well. I thought that was magnificent. All right, Jesse, let's transition to the outside of television studio. A cool, crisp November day, clear skies with a big high pressure system hanging pretty much right over the 4 states that did result in freeze warnings through northeast Oklahoma and northwest Arkansas. No worries though. In about 8 minutes, those are going to be allowed to expire. Just haven't had much of a warm up yet from the Freeman Health System sky camera. Only 36 degrees with a wind chill right now of 30. Miami and Grove, where we see those freeze warnings, hanging on to 32. Let's go 33 in Fort Scott. Fort Scott and Nevada pushing above the freezing mark. It hasn't been too bad. You take that line of Lamar, Carthage, and Monette right there. It's been about mid-30s all morning long. Here's what's happening. The jet stream straight out of Canada with that cold, dry air. And this is happening despite the fact that our surface winds are going to work in from the southwest today. Give it until about 9 o'clock. We'll be up in the high 40s. 10 o'clock to noon hour, high 50s. Top out in the low 60s. So it's not going to be too bad. But winds are going to increase, gusts of 25 miles per hour. So let's probably avoid any outdoor burning. And then overnight, much more mild than what we experienced this morning, as we'll be able to hang in the 40s for Election Day morning. Now, speaking of Election Day, we're actually going to cruise into the high 60s, if not some 70s on Tuesday. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous no matter what time you have to get out to vote. If you're going the traditional route tomorrow, no worries from Mother Nature. As a matter of fact, how about no worries for our first full week of November, as we're going to be abnormally warm for this time of year until we get some thunderstorm activity, but that's not until Sunday. We'll be right back and wrap up this edition of the KOAM Morning News on Fox 14 right after this.
Welcome back to the KOAM Morning News on Fox 14. Here's what's happening today. On the eve of Election Day, both presidential candidates will continue to focus their efforts on the crucial state of Pennsylvania. Former Vice President Joe Biden will be joined by Lady Gaga in Pittsburgh. And President Trump plans to hold a rally in Scranton, where Biden spent his childhood years. As America votes, the number of new coronavirus cases is spiking in most U.S. states. More than 9 million people in the country have been infected so far. More than 230,000 have died, the most in the world. Scottish actor Sean Connery, first actor to play James Bond on the film, has died. He was 90 years old. He also had major roles in films including Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, Highlander, and The Hunt for Red October. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 2000 for services to film and drama. Connery passed away at his home, surrounded by his family and loved ones. Let's check in with Michael with a final look at your forecast.
It's so tempting. I'll go ahead and do it. One ping only.
Oh.
There you go. Sunny skies and up into the 60s. Just about a time to let those freeze warnings expire down to the south. It's going to be a delightful yet mild afternoon. Remember, very dry and a tad bit windy, so no outdoor burning. Hello, warming trend for Election Day all the way into the weekend. Tanya?
Well, you might remember Callie Logue as one of the most decorated high school runners in Kansas history. Well, the Girard product won her third straight women's Big 12 cross-country championship on Friday for Iowa State. Now, Callie claimed the title in 20 minutes. Her 3 Big 12 conference titles are tied for the most in conference history.
Just of note, too, what a weekend for the Logue family, as her little brother Cormac, he's the 3A state champ out of Girard in cross country.
Wow.
Yeah.
They've got a speedy family.
Awesome. Matt and Christy, a tribute to you two as well.
Awesome, awesome.
Well, thank you for letting us put the good in your morning.
Be back with more news and weather when we see you at noon.
Have a great morning and an even better day.